Welcome back, everyone. Today you're joining me here in downtown Canmore, Alberta in Canada, and we are doing a 14-lap crit race in men's Cat 4. Throughout this video, we are going to talk about what crit racing is, the basics, how the rules are different, and things you can do to become better at crit racing. So, let's get started. So, the basics of crit racing are that it's a short race, usually on a closed course, meaning no cars, no pedestrians, no one else. Unlike a road race where on amateur events you'll often only have one lane of the road, so it's a little bit safer. That being said, things move a lot faster, a lot more things are happening, and it's typically a much shorter condensed race, so expect a lot of attacks, a lot of things happening. Like you can see in this video, already on the first lap, people are going off the front trying to make their moves early. So in today's crit race, we are doing a scratch race, which is a fancy word for first across the line. That's the way most road races work. But there are three other types of crits that I'd like to talk about. You've got the win and out. So every, let's say, 1 or 4 laps, they will designate a number of laps, and on that designated lap, whoever is first is out, and they are the winner. So at the first time they designate a lap, you're competing for first place. The second time they do it, you're competing for second and third, and so on and so forth. Usually until they've decided the top 5 or top 10, and after that it becomes a scratch race. First across the line is competing for, let's say, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, etc., and etc. The opposite of that is called a miss and out. So if you are the last across the line on a designated lap, whether that's every lap, every 2 laps, every 4 laps, of course they'll let you know, that person is out. So let's say you start the race with 10 riders, the person who finishes 10th on the first designated lap is out, and they get 10th place, then you're competing for 9th and 8th, and so on and so forth, until you are down to just the last 2 people competing for first and second, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is a brutal race. Finally, you have a points race. That's what we raced last weekend in Edmonton. So with a points race, same thing, designated laps. It's not every lap, but you get points for finishing across the line, either first, second, third, fourth, typically about 5 deep. And at the end of the race, it's not about crossing the line first, it's about having the most points. So in a race like that, you could actually front load your points towards the front while people are still fresh, but people are sort of unsuspecting of attacks, and get all your points and then not really compete for the sprint finish. But of course, in today's race, we are talking about a scratch race, so you need to be there for the finish, and you need to be present and strong, ready for a sprint. So one key difference about crit racing that you don't find in road is that if you have a mechanical or a crash that's certified, you actually get a free lap if it's not the last few laps. Typically it's the last 3 to 5 laps. They won't allow that because it's not fair. But if you have a crash early on in the race isn't over for you. Have that crash, have that mechanical certified by a commissionaire, so someone who's working at the event. They can certify that, and then you can just go hop back in as if nothing had happened. Of course, crashes and mechanicals do happen in races, and it's unfortunate, but the crit, because it's such a small circuit, they can put you back in, no harm, no foul. So in terms of different approaches to racing, let's talk strategy now. I think for any bike race, but for crit racing in particular, there's only really 2 strategies, and there's active and there's reactive types of racing. So active racing is when you're the one who's setting the parameters of the race. You're typically attacking off the front, either trying to make a breakaway or trying to set up the sprint so that you can manipulate the crit to your advantage. So here's what I'm doing here. I'm trying to make the field suffer a little bit with an active strategy of racing. So I've gone off the front. I'm putting in, 700 watts to try to stay away, trying to make these people work a little bit and make them suffer so that the sprinters at the end are a little more tired. My goal here isn't to lap the field. My FTP isn't that high. I'm not a sustained power kind of person. So really, the dominant strategy that I take to crit racing is a more reactive one. Reactive basically means that you are going to respond, and the way that you race is dictated by what your opponents do and what your teammates do. Although hopefully if you have teammates, you figured out what your strategy is going to be beforehand and none of this comes as a surprise. So you can see the people off the front, or rather from the back, have already caught up to me. I've made them work. This was a successful attack in my view. I was never going to get away with, 15 kilometers to go as a smaller rider, but that's okay. So let's talk about reactive racing. So reactive racing is all about counterattacks and finding these opportunities to exploit. And what I mean by that is when people or someone else has made a move, that's your chance to make a counterattack or to go with them. So one example is when you find a rider has broken away, some people decide to chase, some people don't. Your job is going to be to chase. Your job is, if you think this breakaway is viable, is to chase that person down and stick with them, because you're not going to be working as hard and you get the advantage of that breakaway as well. So that's one way you can be a reactive rider. The other way is to launch a counterattack. So as soon as there's a counterattack, or as soon as there's an attack that kind of sticks, you follow along, you see how it plays out, and typically after an attack, people are going to slow right down. People are tired. People aren't as motivated to attack or to make moves, to ride as aggressively for, I'd say, 1 or 2 minutes after. And that's your key moment to make a counterattack, is when people are least expecting it. And that's actually going to be my strategy later on in the race, is to reactively ride and find an opportunity to sprint. Now, you do have to make these opportunities for yourself, but we'll see that later on in the video.
Okay, so let's talk about cornering. In my opinion, cornering is the most important thing in crit racing when it comes to moving up and gaining free speed. If you look at the cornering basics, the basic principle is that you want to move from the outside of the corner towards the inside at the corner or the apex, and then back towards the outside. And what that allows you to do is that allows you to have the largest radius of a turn. All right, so I'll show you an example here. So if you take the inside corner the whole way, your turn radius is actually a lot tighter than if you were to go outside, inside, outside. And similarly, if you were to take the outside line the entire way, you're also going to have a tighter turn radius. And by that, I mean the angle of the circle that you're making, or the angle of the arc while you're going around the corner. And of course, this is so important because the more speed you can carry through a corner, the faster that you're going to be coming out of the corner, the faster that you're going to be able to react to sprints coming out of the corner. Everything just lines up for the next turn or the next sprint or whatever's happening next in the race. I also want to talk about apex. So there's different times you can turn. The correct time to turn is to hit the apex right at that corner, but there are also some advantages to doing what's called a late apex, which means you're turning early and hitting that apex later on in the corner. So what that allows you to do is it allows you to start pedaling faster. You can see it's a tighter turn radius than the correct apex, but if you've got a long straightaway, sometimes it's beneficial to do a late apex. On the other hand, an early apex will seldom pay off because you carry more speed going into the corner, but at the other hand, you essentially get cut off and you have to turn late and you're not able to put down power as quickly out of the corner. Okay, so I want to talk about why cornering is so important here, considering there's 112 turns in this race.
Let's say you took every single turn 0.25 seconds or a quarter of a second faster because you practiced cornering, because you have dialed in those corners, you've pre-raced the course, and you know how to take every corner. Over the course of these 14 laps, you're going 30 seconds faster. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is huge. It's huge in crit racing, but it's huge in any bike race. And of course, aerodynamics matter too, but the theory is that you've got 30 seconds of just free work just by cornering better, especially on a course like this where it's very important. I also want to point out in this left turn coming up that sometimes it's good to corner early. And what I mean by that is you hit the apex earlier and you go in a straight line earlier, you aren't actually taking the smallest turn, or rather the largest turn, But what you're doing is you're cornering early, and what that allows you to do is get back on the pedal sooner, especially if you've got a straightaway that comes up ahead like we did in this turn. On a 90-degree turn like this, where you've got another corner coming up, not really appropriate, but do think about something like that. Every corner is different, and you want to make sure that you're adjusting and you're flexible to the situation. And of course, watch the riders around you, follow their line. That's going to be the safe thing to do for the most part. You can see the person in the pink took the inside line. In this case, it was the safe thing to do. It's not always a safe thing to take an inside line, especially when you've got people coming in at higher speeds. So just do keep that in mind, that just because you're not going at full speed and you can take the inside line, it's not always the safe thing to do. And in fact, that's one of the easiest ways to cause a crash, is by not following lines in a corner. So we've talked strategy, we've talked cornering. The big thing that you've seen me doing for most of this race is of course draft and follow wheels. This ERTC bloke, he's a really fast one, and I know that his wheel is going to be solid, so I try to get on it. 447's fighting me for his wheel, so I can't do that. If you don't know, typically you'll gain someone's wheel if you can overtake the wheel of the person fighting for it. So what I mean by that is, if 447 and I were side by side and I got my wheel in front of his and sort of slowly started shafting him out, I would gain ERTC's wheel. I would gain the wheel in front. And of course, I'm unable to do that. I thought I took this corner a little bit better. Clearly in the video I didn't, but I'm right on this person's wheel. I'm not working as hard. The one thing you do want to be careful about following wheels is that you don't want to follow wheels blindly. I know that these people are strong, but if you follow someone's wheel and they're getting a bit tired, and you let that gap form, so right now we've got about a 1 second gap, but a 1 second gap becomes a 2 second gap and a 3 second gap, and all of a sudden, if this person in front of me decides that they're done, they can no longer chase, then that means that I've gone from chasing down a 1 second gap on my own to chasing down a 3 second gap. And of course, in a crit race where everything's happening so fast, that can be very detrimental. As a smaller rider, I never want to be chasing gaps on my own. So sometimes you do have to take that hit preemptively and just, put out some watts, make a sprint to close that gap while it's still small. It's strung out here. And what I mean by that is, we're riding single file because we're going quite fast. Although it says we're only going 40, it felt a lot stronger than that. And as you can see, we finally caught up to the group, and now we are riding 3 wide, so it's no longer strung out. People are slowing down. They're not working that hard. I'm doing 200 watts just to stay in, what is this, like 5th place right now, so that's not too bad. We're going to watch the race a little bit more and see if we pick up on any strategies, but let me know if there's any tips or tricks that you see that I've maybe not identified that you think would be helpful for other riders. I'd love to hear those comments, and please leave them below. All right, so we're coming up on 5 laps to go here. You can see the pace has slowed down, and I see that. So I'm going to launch a quick attack here, first to the corner, see what happens. I think my goal here was to gauge how tired people were, and if I could stay with 5 laps to go, I would try. It doesn't happen. I see that right away when I look back, but you can see here where I take this corner really nicely. So I went outside, inside, and then I went back outside again. In that event, I've slowed down. I'm doing 150 watts, which is, not an attacking pace by any means. But people do have to work to catch up, especially when it's strung out. So you may not realize that you're not hurting the person who's, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or even 5th behind you. But the person who's sitting in 20th place, that small surge is going to hurt them quite a bit. And because I'm not a very strong sprinter, I need to make sure that I increase my chances by whittling out the competition as much as possible. So here I'm already past, and someone's launching a counterattack with their reactive strategy. That's really good. I stick with them, This attack's not going to stick, but it's a good go. And with 4 laps to go, I can't risk someone going off the front like that. So I need to make sure that they're with me. And as you can see, there's another attack coming off here. I'm sitting in 3rd, which is a really good position to be in because I'm able to respond to all of these attacks. I should be closing this gap a little bit more, and I am, but they're working fairly hard and we're all tired, so I think I'm having a little bit of trouble closing this gap. Now, if I were sitting much further back, again, I would be hurting a lot more. As you can see, the pace is slowed down. I'm able to catch up. And I'm sitting in a pretty good position for 4 laps to go here. You want to make sure that you're within, I would say, at least the top 10 with these number of laps to go, especially when there's a lot of corners. The race isn't going to be won at the last sprint. The race or the finish is essentially to the last corner. See, there's another counterattack going on. And of course, that's the best time to make a counterattack is right after attack. So what you're going to see here is just attack after attack after attack. And what I'm trying to do is stay afloat, stay with the lead of this race while not working too hard. So I'm sort of jumping from wheel to wheel, making sure that I'm still in this race without having to ever face the wind myself as a smaller rider. And again, so I'm following 441's wheel. It's quite a strong rider, a much bigger rider than I am, so this is a comfortable draft for me. And even if the cornering isn't what the ideal is, I'm still trying to follow the wheel as much as possible just to get that ideal draft. And to be fair, it is a pretty good corner. I think what I'm trying to just say is even if it weren't, I would probably be following 441's wheel to the T like I am now. So as you start to get into the last few laps of the race, we're approaching 3 laps to go, you want to also keep in mind which corners you think people are going to attack from based on the previous laps in the race. So obviously the last corner is going to be quite vital. I actually think the last 2 corners, and if you look at the map on the top right screen, I'm talking about the 2 laps that kind of make an S-bend towards the south of the map. And I think that those are actually going to be the key corners, not to win necessarily because you're still 500 meters out, but you need to be in a good position because you can't be jockeying for wheels, if you're sitting at 20th place with those 3 corners out, you're just not going to be in the race enough in order to compete for the sprint finish. So start thinking about that. Ideally, that'll come in your race recce as well, so before the race, but you'll have a better sense of what these corners are in real life once the race has started and depending on how people are taking them as well. Okay, so as we're approaching this S-bend, I want to pay attention a little bit to how we're taking the corners together because when these corners are so close together, remember, you're not taking just one corner at a time. You have to think about them as a set of corners. So when we hit the inside, so right now we're moving to the outside and then we're sweeping in to the inside, which is the apex, and then back out, you need to think about what that does for your setup on the next corner. Because if you don't adjust, you're going to end up on the wrong side. So as soon as we take this turn and we're drifting off to the outside, we need to think about shifting left all the way to the end of the road and then taking that corner again, outside, inside, outside. So that is something to think about.
Okay, so we're coming up to our last 2 laps here. You'll notice that the field is quite strung out, and especially in the last 2 laps, if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. And what that means is people are going to be jockeying for positions, so you do have to be a little bit aggressive. So I'm following 445's wheel here, just so that I can be in the top 5, top 10. Otherwise, you get yourself into a position where everyone's vying for position, and you're going to be left out of the sprint at the end. So here we took the inside line, which is not ideal. It doesn't get you as fast out of the corner, but sometimes that's what you have to do. Same here, I'm going to try to get out of the inside line just so that I have a nice clean line here and I can maintain some speed through the corner. So I do that. And essentially my strategy for the last lap and a half here, at least for now, is to just maintain position. Don't let anyone get away. If there are breaks, you have to jump on them at this point in time. There's no such thing as just letting a brake go in and hoping that it'll extinguish on itself. As we're coming up on this corner again, remember how we're drifting from the right side, cutting that apex, and then we're going back outside, and then immediately after that we have to go back towards the left in order to hit that next outside, inside, outside corner. And that's going to be really important as we get into the last lap of the race, because this is actually where I start to make my move. Okay, so you can see people are starting to get antsy here. Everything's starting to wind up. People are putting out quite some decent power. 404 is making an attack here with 1 lap to go. And your job at this point is just to keep up, really. Make sure none of this gets away, because otherwise you're not going to be in sprint contention. So you can see quite strong riders. It's going to get a little bit strung out here. So just make sure you're behind someone's wheel who's strong, a wheel that you can trust for now, and then save some energy for the last kilometer or so. But of course, if you do need to burn some matches in order to stay on, make sure you do that, because otherwise you're not going to be in contention. It doesn't matter how much energy you have at the end of the race. If you're not able to compete for that sprint finish, then all that's pretty moot. So make sure that you are working hard, just not harder than you need to. So as we come up into the last 4 corners of the race here, I want to make sure that I'm in a good position, that I'm not caught guttered, meaning I'm not stuck between a rider and the side of the road, so that if something does happen, I'm able to react. Luckily, we're 1 deep here. I notice that this person's not moving fast enough, so I make my move, take this corner quite aggressively, and I'm able to catch up here. And I'm coming in with so much speed, free speed, that I'm able to sort of dive bomb in front, cut the inside line, safely sweep, take this corner first, and then before anyone's able to react, really sprint to the finish. And there are some stronger sprinters out there, but they're just not able to keep up because I had that advantage coming out of that last corner. Right, so today we talked about strategy, tactics, cornering, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.